Welcome back to another episode of the Space Force Mascot Moonicles. Today with the Shadowy Man and the colors of joy. Diary entry from 21st June 2020. The summer moon was working undercover when night and day met at turning point, and I visited the official peace oak by my house to celebrate the occasion at 0 hours. There was nobody on the street, and the birds were quiet. The oak seemed to glow, and when I entered his field, my distant vision was confirmed. I looked for the lightning equipment that caused this display, and when I found none, I figured that this was another case for the Space Force Mascot. I sat down on the bench around the 149-year-old trunk and rolled myself a cigarette. Enjoying the peace of night, I watched the tobacco that I had turned into smoke draw funny figures in the light of the oak. When I finished smoking, I stood up on the bench and turned around to let the oak know that I was ready to go. The trunk opened up, and I stepped into a small elevator where only one can fit. I traveled either very high up or very deep down. And when the elevator finally stopped, a dim-lit, sparsely furnished room opened up. And I saw the back of a shadowy man standing by the window. I took one step into the room, and there I thought about what to do next when the shadowy man said, "If you are looking for a tea party, you came to the wrong place." This took me by surprise, and I decided to let it stand uncommented. I began to wonder what he was looking at, and he said, "Once you have seen, you cannot unsee. This is not a dog and pony show." And he pointed with his thumb over his shoulder to the elevator. I felt quite puzzled and thought about this for a while, and then decided to puzzle him as well. I slowly began to move towards the window. Before I got close enough to see anything, he turned around and showed me his fair-skinned face with piercing gray eyes staring at me. And I remembered the story of the transparent people that live in the world within the world. And he said, "If you take one more step, you can never go back." So I did. And in his eyes I saw that he was indeed surprised. He watched closely as I took another step, and another, and there I saw two birds sitting on the windowsill behind him. They had the shape and size of ravens, and the color of doves, and I stood in awe of their beauty. The shadowy man kept his eyes on mine as I continued to approach the window to see what they see. I looked down from the top floor of a skyscraper onto a gray city, and gray streets, and more gray skyscrapers, and gray people were rushing from one point to another. 4 gray trees with gray leaves surrounded the gray city, and the only sign of life was the movement of the gray bodies. And I don't remember how long I stood there and cried at this sight. When I finished crying, I asked the shadowy man, how can they live without colors? He answered, they don't. I didn't understand, and he said, I can show you. And he stretched out his hand towards me. The birds flapped their wings, and I felt highly encouraged to take it. So I did. And in one cry of the bird, we arrived downtown Gray City. We were standing in the middle of a very busy square. The first Space Force mascot and the shadowy man with 2 birds on his shoulders that have the shape and size of ravens and the color of doves, and nobody seemed to see us. The shadowy man handed me a small cup and explained, if you want to see what they see, you have to drink from their water. So I did it again, and there, glaring lights came screaming at me from all sides, from the houses, the cars, and the people, who had sprayed their hair and faces with shrieking colors, and wore blinking costumes and gadgets that glowed in the dark like a rainbow at night. My ears started to bleed, and when I reached to cover them, the shadowy man put his coat around me, and here I found peace. And in another cry of the bird, we were back in his room. After some time of recovery, I asked the shadowy man that moves like a bat, why do their colors create such disharmony? He answered, because they created them on false notes. I stood by the top floor window over Gray City again and rested my eyes on the beauty of the birds on the windowsill. When it occurred to me that the original colors must still be alive. I looked at the shadowy man that moves like a bat, and he looked at me, and we stood and looked at each other all night, until he finally decided to answer my question. He opened his coat and undercoat, and through his skin I saw all the original colors held inside his heart. Again, I didn't understand. And again, he showed me. He pointed to the last open space of Gray City, on a street where every citizen passes by at least once a day. And he let a handful of beautiful flowers grow there, and joy filled my heart at their sight. And I noticed that not one citizen of Gray City had stopped to look at them all day. I admired them all night under the starlight. The next day, the Grays poured cement over them and built the last skyscraper on top. I rolled myself a cigarette and blew funny figures out into the wind over Gray City. And I looked for the one piece that didn't fit. There, in one of the far corners of the city, I spotted a hunched-over man with a little boy on his hand, walking very slowly. And I watched them all day until they went into the skyscraper across the street and appeared in a window on the 13th floor. I asked the shadowy man who they were, and he answered, "That's the old blind man and his grandson." Without thinking, I said, "Grow some flowers on their balcony." The birds seemed to like the idea, and so it was decided. The shadowy man smiled a little, but only because he felt sorry for me, and he granted me my wish. Together we watched and waited, and the next morning the old blind man stepped out onto his balcony to smoke a cigarette. He smoked very slowly and had to relight several times. When he suddenly moved his head and nose in a striking manner, I got a little excited, and even the shadowy man that moves like a bat was watching like a hawk. The old man found the flowers and admired them with his gentle hands, and while enjoying their lovely fragrance, he called for his grandson, and the little boy saw the flowers, and he clapped his little feet and danced to their music. He wouldn't want me to say this, but I saw a little tear in the eye of the shadowy man. And there I understood. They enjoyed the flowers very much. And one day a butterfly came to visit from the other side of the river. And the next day a bee came, and together they enjoyed the beauty of the flowers. And the next year 5 more flowers grew for the old blind man and his grandson. I turned to the keeper of the colors and said, "The cup of tea sounds mighty good right now." He smiled a little and said, "I wasn't joking. All I have is coffee." We snickered a little and enjoyed a very strong café americano. Before returning to the 149-year-old peace oak by my house, he asked me to let you know that it's best to dance like nobody is watching. Thank you for listening. See you again next time.